Moving on to baseball, couple things. Looking at our White Sox. Number one, we said goodbye to Jose Abreu. He signed a 3-year, $60 million deal with the Houston Astros. We've talked about the White Sox roster in general, what they needed, what they were kind of looking at going into free agency, cap space, everything else. And I believe on the same day this week, they inked Mike Clevenger to a 1-year, $12 million deal to essentially be the fifth member of that starting rotation at this point. But Wayne, just wanted your thoughts on both of those signings.
I mean, good for the Astros. They don't even have a GM, right? Like,
yeah, not really.
Yeah,
just Jim Crane.
Yeah. It's kind of like I don't know how that'll work out. I was like, Brady was like, "Hey, can I just join?" And they're like, I don't know. The owner was like, "Yeah, sure. Here's a bunch of money. Want it?" Like, yeah, okay. But yeah. So, I think it's a great signing for the Astros. Gurriel's gone, right? So I think it's great for them. Like, you look at that lineup, it's sick. It's pretty sick. I think Abreu is probably going to be like what 6th or 7th or something like that in the order there, and that's just nuts. So you're talking about someone who was an MVP, right, like 2 years ago. So and this year he wasn't so bad either. So I think going forth, I know he's 36 or he's going to be 36. So it's like, yeah, he's getting older, but he's still a really good bat, takes care of himself, really excellent professional. Kind of sad, I think, of like, how he kind of departed. I think a lot of people made fun of, like, I guess, Jerry Reinsdorf and how, like, kind of what he said, about Abreu, kind of was like kind of soft ass, if you will. So I don't know, like it definitely is a mixed feeling, but I think it's nice, I think, for Abreu. Hopefully he does kind of win a ring, even though I kind of like, not the Astros again. So I do wonder if this is like, going to be, I guess, finalizes this whole like Justin Verlander maybe coming back type of speculation. I mean, it sounds like Verlander wants like $40 million a year, and I don't know if the Astros are going to be able to get that done, especially if they don't have a GM, or I don't know. But again, hey, it looks like they're able to get deals without a GM. So, but yeah, Brady, a great player. Definitely think he kind of belongs into the talks of like White Sox great first basemen, with the Frank Thomases, Paul Konerkos, and all that. So, but yeah, I don't know, Mike Clevenger. It's definitely a mixed feeling. It's glad it's like a short-term type of deal. That totally makes sense there. For 1 year or so, it has battled, I think, the past couple of years, injuries. Kind of has limited his production. Had like a career high, like an ERA this previous season with the Padres. Was pretty decent or okay, like kind of what you expect from a fifth starter. I think like maybe 3/4 to the season, but his last quarter of the season was pretty awful. And we saw it in the postseason too, right? I think it was like, I think he had was it like 6 runs on him or something like that, and like no outs, I think, in his like last outing, as a Padre. And I think that's when I was like, yeah, let's get him out of here. So hopefully, he shows a little bit, maybe somewhere between, probably between his Padres self and then his when he was in Cleveland, right? Like that version where he had like a 3 point whatever, like mid 3s ERA. So if we can get something like that out of a fifth starter, great deal. Maybe some spot starts here and there, if things don't work out. So 1 year deal, I don't think it's too bad, but could there have been better deals? Maybe, but at the same time, I think there's a lot worse people that we could have signed than Clevenger. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess touching on Abreu, the first thing that I noticed was 3 years, $60 million. And I just thought to myself, like, hell no. I mean, hell no, based on where we're at, what we need as a team. Love Jose Abreu as a player, what he's done, all that. And, granted, if we didn't have a first baseman, DH, replacements kind of lined up who have the potential and ceilings like those two guys do and have put up output, despite injuries. I might be thinking a little bit differently, but if that was a 1 year deal for that same amount, I'd be like, okay, I can see that. I get that. For the Astros, I think they're almost looking at it like we're paying you 2 years, $60 million in reality, because you're paying for diminishing returns once you get to the back end of your 30s. Like you said, Jose Abreu, consummate professional, has kept his body in great shape, almost plays, full season every year. So I respect that about him. And even last year with, his power production going down, his hard hit, percentile was one of its best. His ability to hit off the top 25 pitchers in the game was, elite. So it's like, he's still there as far as a player goes, and putting him in the Astros lineup is just like, that's disgusting. I mean, I'm all on board with his talent. I guess I was just looking at it from the financial perspective of like team need, where we're at, what's his actual value, and like teams are going to pay up in free agency, especially at the start. So, it all makes kind of sense in a way, but I think we made the right call. And I know a lot of Chicago media out there. I've listened to a lot of Chicago White Sox podcasts lately, and people are destroying this. And I get it. I feel like sometimes is it like the emotional rational, like where are we at on that scale with a guy like Jose? Because he's like Paul Konerko. He's like Frank Thomas. I mean, he is like, he's a White Sox. Like you can't, see him any other way. So I totally get that. But I think we made the right move. Clevenger was a guy that I had on our list, like on the starting pitcher, like guys that I think are really attractive. And I say this because 2017 to 2020, one of the best starters in the American League. Went 200 innings one of those seasons. Other than that, his K per 9 percentage was great. His velocity was looking good. He's got the weirdest delivery, maybe in the big leagues, and maybe that's something that Ethan Katz works on him with. But I think a lot of people, especially media and these analysts that I'm talking about, they kind of look at this fact that he's coming off of Tommy John and say, okay, well, he's, damaged goods. He can't bounce back for them. He can't rebound from it. But it's like Jacob deGrom, Steven Strasburg, Adam Wainwright, these guys all came back from Tommy John and have had like very successful careers. I mean, I don't have to say much about a lot of those guys. I mean, Strasburg even won, World Series MVP coming back from a Tommy John surgery. So I don't think that that's like the one thing I'm going to pin this all on. And, he's already a year removed from that. He went through, a very, like you said, mediocre season. Velocity was down. He was getting hit pretty hard. But he knows how to pitch in the major leagues, and he's a seasoned vet, and he takes care of AL Central opponents. And that's something that statistically can't be, disproven. And, a 1 year prove it deal for me, for a guy like that. I mean, he's going to come into this season like licking his chops. Like he's trying to, bank on that next big contract, maybe his last big contract. You don't know. But, I think with these signings, they got to like start thinking about other things for the White Sox. So I will come back to that. But if you have any reaction to that, cool. Other than that, I was also looking for like, what now do you see with the White Sox based on where we were on our last episode versus where we are now?
Yeah. I mean, Michael Conforto. I think those are all great points. I'm thinking like, yeah, we still need outfield. We still need second base, right? I think those are the two ones there. But yeah, I agree everything we said with Clevenger. Prove it deal. If we can get, again, he's gonna be our fifth starter. Hopefully, Kopech is healthy enough, right? So as the fourth starter there, and the rest of the order. Hopefully Giolito has a bounce back and everything, like, et cetera. So, but, it is nice to see that we had Dylan Cease really kind of stand out there second in the Cy Young. So overall, like, I feel pretty good right now with the pitching squad. Like, I don't know who else we were thinking we're going to get, like what, Justin Verlander? Like, no. So, so I'm definitely for that. But yeah, everything else, I know we touched about like all the left-handed outfielders out there. I think one name somebody tossed out to us in the YouTube comments actually was Cody Bellinger. It was just like, okay, maybe, let's get all this money out there and everything and just like toss it in there. So, but hey, if we could, why not? If the price is right. But yeah, I'm definitely looking at like, Michael Conforto over there a little bit more so of, and then, is Adam Frazier probably at second base is probably like the top people on my list at this moment that seem reasonable in terms of contracts that we could potentially get. So, but yeah, What are your thoughts, Pat?
I guess with the Clevenger thing, the only other piece of that I wanted to bring up was this idea of folks being torn between Clevenger or just re-signing Cueto. I'm okay with what we did because like Cueto is back end of his 30s as well. He was on a minors deal, free agency walk deal, where it's kind of like he was hungry. He needed to prove himself. He needed to get back on that bump. He had, motivation to do so. But if you throw him, 2 years and, double digit millions for his time, like how hungry is he going to be? Like, is he going to bounce back and be what we saw in 2022? Or, are we seeing a guy who's now fed and is like, well, I can be, 420, 430 ERA, like no sweat. So I'm kind of on that line of like, sign these deals, even if they're 1 years, I'd love to have a multi-year commitment with, a guy with, Clevenger's type of upside. But, in a year like this, like if we're on that fence between, are we contenders still, or, do we have to make more changes, in 24, like we'll get there, we'll get there when we do. Love that you brought up Michael Conforto for the outfield. Like that was a guy, he's going back, doubling back on some, analytics and stuff. I mean, a guy who's 70, second percentile in, it's outfield average outs, I believe. It's a basically a kind of a looking at his range in the outfield, whether or not balls, were hard to catch, easy to catch. They kind of put a gauge on, how difficult some of these plays were and how routine others were. And he's in the 72nd percentile of outfielders as far as his coverage goes, in the outfield. In the same sense, like his OBP is also 73 percentile. So it's kind of like, we're looking for a guy who can play defense and get on base for us because, we've got a lot of guys I think who have some power potential, and it'd just be nice to have, some extra RBIs attached to those. I brought up Kurt Kiermaier in the past, so I don't want to get into that, but I think he'd be just another, quality defensive outfielder, left-handed hitter to put out there. And looking at Gene Segura one more time, I mean, I know we're also looking at the lefty-righty splits, but I mean, this guy's just like a pure hitter, and he actually plays really good defense too. And, with the shift being, banned, it's kind of like, I'd love to have a second baseman who's got some great range. I know Frazier does as well. So it's like, I'm okay with either of those options, but I think we definitely need some true major leaguers in all three of those spots.
Yeah, no, I think Segura's good. And, he did show like he still has some game, with the Phillies and everything. So I do like him overall. So, another name out there, we'll just be tossing names because, hey, that's what we're all about here. So other names that I could potentially like, would be like Andrew Benintendi, actually. Didn't play too much, I think, with the Yankees, split time between the Yankees and the Royals here. But overall, like, he gets on base, hits pretty well, and has an excellent glove. So it's like, what kind of more do you want from, an outfielder? When you already do have like, players like Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez and like, a bunch of power, a healthy Tim Anderson, right? So I think he could fit right in pretty well there. And then if we really just want to like go crazy and, I know this name's been kind of tossed around a little bit too. Joey Gallo, if that is possible too. Joey Bats, like if, I know he's definitely like kind of the Adam Dunn type of level, right? Where he just hits homers, strikes out, or walks, right? Nothing in between. So, but hey, if we can get him at a decent price too, again, that's the big kicker there. Why not take a 1 or 2 year deal on him or something like that? So I think somebody like him could, step right in and provide more power from the left side there. So.
Yeah. I mean, outside of just the outright signings, I think one thing that's become a little bit more clear, or like the potential for it, is who we would actually trade. I kind of feel like I'm getting these vibes of like a Liam Hendricks or Graveman going somewhere for an outfielder. I know we've talked about Gavin Sheets too, but a lot of analysts are talking about one of the core pieces of this team, whether it's Jimenez, Robert, Anderson, or Moncada being dealt. I don't see Moncada based on his salary and his, just the contract in general. But I mean, I can definitely see us dealing from within to kind of like patch up some of these holes and not have to, go above the, the cap limits that they've set. So it's just like, maybe it is plucking from this bullpen where it's like maybe some of these guys can have some bounce back years where if you lose a Hendricks, like you're still well enough covered to, miss out on a star closer or something like that. But yeah, what I've heard is that they're just going to be active at these winter meetings, and I feel like people are saying like they're going to wheel and deal, and I'm like, all right, like let's see what we got. But yeah, just excited for what's to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And if they want to go inward and go the cheaper route, I mean, Oscar Collis, right? It's like, could he? Like he's had. Eventually, you got to bring up some of these people. That he's 24 years old. He's only going to get older. Like I think that's a good age, and he's shown production in the AAA level. So, hey, maybe we see if he's able to, depending on spring training does and everything, maybe we'll just see how he does and kind of play him throughout. So, there's definitely options I think out there for the White Sox, but yeah, we'll see how things transpire.
Yeah. On a similar note, I've heard Lennon Sosa might get strong looks at second. I've heard Romy Gonzalez might too. So, like you're saying, it's like we've got this depth at the minor leagues that's like graduating from AAA, and it's like it's now or never, boom or bust. And Colas, I think, has much more of an upside than those other two guys, but in the same sense, it's like, we might just have to give them a look and pair them with Lurie Garcia or like somebody's been there and kind of done it a little bit. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing I'm like, do the White Sox need more leadership or something like that? Like I know Tim Anderson, he's kind of like the one person there, but they lose somebody like Abreu, right? You definitely need those players that are kind of like quasi coaches. And Abreu was definitely like spoke Spanish, Cuban. They have a lot of Cuban players, et cetera. So he was definitely kind of that staple there. So now it's like, well, where's that going to come from? Like, I know we have a new manager and everything, and he seems great and all, but yeah, definitely need more of that leadership, I feel like. And so it's like, do we go through free agency on there, or can we expect some of these other players to step up and kind of provide that mature older brother or uncle or father type of figure to some of the younger players that are around? So yeah, I think those are my only thoughts of like, do we get that from free agency, or hey, maybe we do ask some other people, some of these players to step up more so.
Yeah, or the hiring of their hitting coach Jose Castro out of the Atlanta organization. I mean, Cuban native, somebody who probably speak to Yohan, Eloy, Luis, kind of get in their heads. I mean, he worked with Atlanta for the last 8 years. So you look at the hitting that's come out of their minor league systems onto the major league field. I mean, that could speak volumes. I mean, I think Grifol is also going to be leaned on a lot for that kind of mentorship and guidance outside of, losing a guy like Jose, who, everybody said is a class act and a great leader. I think as far as that goes, just on that note of like, maturity or growing and things like that, I think, maybe the impetus for some of these deals will be around that, like bringing high character acquisitions, whether it's free agency, trades. I mean, maybe it is shaking up the culture of the team. Maybe, Jose was great in his own right, but maybe he just wasn't enough to really like balance out the personalities in that, locker room. So maybe you eliminate a couple of them, or you overwhelm them with stronger personalities or, new factions or something like that. So I'm kind of like just interesting to see how they're identifying what they actually need.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, regardless, in Rick Hahn we trust, right? So